You.
Hey, how's it going, gentlemen?
Hey, what's going on, Ryan? Hey, a Rochester number.
How about that?
Yep, 5-8. Yep,
Rocking the 585 still?
yep. No, I actually moved out of Rochester this previous summer with my girlfriend for a job she was taking, but we still got the 585 numbers.
It doesn't matter anymore.
Yeah.
10 years ago, zip code mattered when, you had to pay for long distance.
I'll tell
It
you-
doesn't matter
I'll tell you where
anymore.
I want to move.
You want to move to Arizona? I don't blame you. So we wanted to have you on, Ryan, because for a variety of different reasons. But one, you are one of the funniest Twitter follows that has under 1,000 followers. I don't know why your following hasn't exploded yet. We obviously hope to take care of you and help you out with that. But you are one of the funniest Twitter follows and really always dialed in. Like your points are always really poignant. You're not afraid to defend your point. You and I got into a Twitter battle with a bunch of Saints fans.
I know.
When this airs, it will be a few days ago now. But like, what made you want to start talking about the Bills on Twitter? Like, it's a deep and dark hole to go in. So what made you say I'm just going to go both feet in?
I only got onto Twitter about 3 years ago, and then, I started just interacting with more people through my personal account and just like reading stuff and listening to content. And like the more and more I listened and the more and more I read, I thought that there may be a space for me in one way or another because I always felt, there was places for me to contribute. And then quarantine happened and I figured out how to work WordPress and I made, a different account for my Bill stuff. And, I've been super fortunate that there's, as much as Twitter can be a black hole, and a lot of negativity, but in the Bills Twitter sphere, there's there's you between you and, you guys, and, there's so many great people who've given me platforms and invited me on their shows, and, it really is a really great community once you weed through some of the nonsense, and, it's just something that's fun. I have a lot of fun with it.
So you also just got picked up by Fanatics, right?
Yep. I was doing my own blog for a little while. I jumped over to downtown, and then I've been going back and forth a lot with Mathis and Judge Mathis, and he invited me on to come on. So I'll be starting a podcast with. You should also follow my. I should have had a Twitter handle handy, but I don't have it. But Mitch Broder. I don't think we're dropping the title just yet, but we should be dropping the podcast next Friday or Saturday, or I guess this Friday or Saturday. So we'll have a podcast, and hopefully I'll get back into writing pretty soon. But yeah, I'm over with the Buffalo Fanatics. They're a great team.
Yeah, we've known Rico and those guys for
Yep.
it's a long time. It's a long time. So with kind of looking down the road a little bit, you seem to be pretty well rounded about the stuff that you look at for the Bills. So let me ask you a little bit about free agency, right? Because that's kind of where a lot of people's heads are going to. It's definitely something you and I kind of worked around talking about the Saints. So I have a feeling your head is probably there. So free agency for Buffalo, if you had to rank top three needs, right? Top three needs in free agency, excluding the draft. Imagine as if the draft isn't even going to happen, right? If you had to name your top three positional needs, where are the three positions that you're trying to focus your scouting staff in free agency?
I think you need to find some way to shore up the offensive line one way or another. I think you have a lot of players on that are decent, but I think to make the jump, you're going to have to find someone who can, the measuring stick's the Chiefs. So you're going to have to find someone who can go up against Chris Jones for 60 minutes. I think that's a huge part of it. And I think the other part that I keep thinking back to is, I don't know if it's a position, but this team, and it's going back to the point that measuring sticks the Chiefs, this team, not just the Chiefs, but got torn apart by tight ends this year. Mike Gesicki in Miami, Waller did some damage against them in that early game, and then Travis Kelce in 2 games tore this defense apart. And I don't know, and this kind of gets into the conversation around Milano. I don't think they need to scrap everything, but I think there needs to be some sort of philosophical shift to this defense that, that makes it so they are more able to guard tight ends, specifically guys like Travis Kelce.
Mm-hmm. Well, the Bills are kind of fortunate in the fact that this upcoming draft class is like loaded with tight ends, right? There's a huge load. So I heard you say 2. So what's your third position in free agency? You kind of got to go and find.
I think you got to go. I'd really like a best tight end. I'm not. I've been very critical of Dawson Knox. I do think it's. I think I forgot where I saw it, but I think it was like Greg Voorhees had a story that coming into this year, Dawson Knox is a guy who's only had 40 games in his lifetime playing tight end. So I think it's, I think you kind of got to look at him, a guy who might be a long-term project. I mean, because you have guys like Logan Thomas that are now just developing. Like, it's a long-term position, but I don't think the Bills can sit there for another year and say that, let's let him keep. I think there needs to be someone veteran in that room who can produce. And someone I really like, and, I know his production's been a question, is I really, really, really like John Smith in Tennessee if he hits the market.
I don't know if you're going to see Jonnu Smith hit the market. I don't know about that. He's sort of a weird fit for a lot of teams, right? Because he's not that traditional tight end. But that's the way that these players, that's the way that position goes now. It's like we talked about years and years and years ago. We talked about Darren Waller when he came out of college from Tech, and you're like, this guy, they're going to transition to tight end, and he just kind of middled in the league for a while. Yeah. And they finally got with an organization that figured out how to unlock that. And, you look at guys coming out of college, like Pitts is a great example, or even O.J. Howard recently. You expect to see that transition of the position to those hyper-athletic tight ends. But I got to be honest with you, it's more miss than it is hit. Like, I think I agree with you. I agree with you in the fact that you probably need to sign a veteran tight end who fits that hyper-athletic mold, because when you're trying to take the stab at it in the draft, there's more misses than hits. Don't get me wrong, I like Noah Fant an awful lot, but I mean, Noah Fant is going to end up spending the rest of his career with the Broncos just waiting for a quarterback to eventually figure out how to throw the football. And then he's going to hit the free agent market, and Lord knows where he's going to end up. Hawkinson's not that athletic freak like Fant is. Hawkinson's more of a callback to your more traditional tight ends. Look at Dawson Knox. He's kind of in the middle. Well, what do you want to do with your offense? And even if you had a qualified tight end, what's Brian Daboll going to do with him, right? And if you're going to sign a veteran, sure, they need to fit Brian Daboll's system, but they also need to fit a non-Brian Daboll system for whatever happens next year. Because if this team tanks or this team does great, Daboll's not there.
And I think that's a fair point. I think that there's something to be said about the fact that nowhere Daboll has gone, including college, he hasn't really ever been able to successfully use tight ends. And, I think a lot of the debate around the offense this season is, it's tough to make that next step, because I think the Bills aren't going to make the step in offense that they went from last year to this year. Like, it just that you don't see offense of that quality, right? But I think it's how can you be just a little bit better. And I think, whether that's in the tight end position, whether that's upgrading the wide receiver position, I think, the bigger question, and it goes back to what we, talked about with the Saints fans on Twitter last night, is, how how can you get someone like that, get someone to take that next step, but also add value, because you run the risk. As much as I will advocate for Johnny Smith, you run the risk if you give out big contracts that it could end up, sinking you in the long term. So I think it's a really tricky position to be in for Dable and McDermott and the Bills, but at least they're coming at it from second place in the AFC and not 7-9 like they've been for the last decade.
Well, we just talked about it on another episode, where you have to kind of. I know everybody wants big free agent signings, but Mar and I are both among the belief that you kind of have to walk carefully through this free agency class, because you got fifth-year options coming up on Tremaine and Josh, and that's a totally different scenario, right? Their fifth-year options are going to be double what they're making right now.
Yeah.
So it's a time bomb, and you really got to make your decision. What are you going to do with them? Are you going to buy out Josh now? I personally don't believe that to be the right thing to do. There's a lot of things that you have coming up. What's the best approach? And is it to just be really, really careful in this free agency class? I know it's not what a lot of people want, but do you have to walk carefully here looking down the road?
Right. Because you've seen teams that end up going all in. Like, you look at that Jacksonville team that made that one run, and that this Bills team and that Jacksonville team are built very different. But I think you can see what happens when you invest in the wrong players. And I liked a lot, what you talked about with Milano with your last show and Edmonds here. Like, I think in the long term, I think Edmonds is a more valuable player to this team. So giving $14 million to Milano probably isn't the right move, especially, one of the things I keep looking back to, and one of the things I want to look through this offseason, if you look back to those McDermott Carolina defenses that were really good, like Thomas Davis was a really good linebacker, but he wasn't the athlete that Matt Milano was. They had Shaq Thompson in there a lot, who was kind of that hybrid role. So I think, being why, I think you hit the right on the nose there with, I think, spending wisely, so you don't, when you have to give Josh $35 million, when you have to give Tremaine Edmonds whatever his market value is going to be. I think it's so many teams get close and then bottom out because they go all in on the wrong player.
So if you have the 30th pick in the NFL draft in 2021, I mean, you've already said you need someone to cover the tight ends in the league. You need to reshore that offensive line, or you need a tight end of your own. What are you taking? Are you fulfilling one of those positions via the draft?
I'm not very much going tight end in the draft. I think like you guys said, I think it's such hit or miss. Like Pat Freiermuth looks like a fun guy. There's no guarantee that he comes in and produces right away. I think your best chance, I think a really good opportunity for this team is to trade back, but that's a different discussion. But I think trade back in the 28 picks. But like you guys talked about in your previous show, I think if they let Feliciano walk, I think a really, really smart move at 30 would be bring in a Wyatt Davis, or if they let if they let Williams walk, bringing in a tackle, I think someone to shore up the line. Because I think there's guys in the draft that you can pick up later that can be a tight end eraser. There's a kid from FSU, I can't pronounce his name, that everyone's crushing over, that seems to be, can be that positionless Tyrann Mathieu, Buda Baker, Minka Fitzpatrick player that can take out a safety like that. So I don't know, from what I've done so far, I don't know if it's a tight end eraser in that first round, but at first round, I really, really like the idea of going either offensive line, and also I guess there's that linebacker, there's a lot of people in this draft class I can't pronounce, linebacker from Notre Dame that really athletic. That's almost a more athletic Matt Milano, former safety type linebacker that I think could step in on a rookie contract and play that Matt Milano role.
Okay.
Yeah, Paul and I are of a similar mindset, because a lot of times what happens is that 30th pick, Well, those later picks, really, like 25 to about 32, a lot of teams try to jump back into the first round to get the fifth-year option on a player, which is going to be even more, I would say, more expensive this year because you're looking at the salary cap that's not going up. So, to have a fifth-year option on a player, on a developmental player that you think could be an immediate impact to your team, it's going to be the Bills might make out. They might get a second and third, an extra second and third in 2022 to circumvent having to re-sign Tremaine and Josh. So
absolutely. And someone else I'm really looking at, that I really think is a smart move if you're looking for cap flexibility in the future. And one guy I'm really looking at, that keeps jumping into my head is, do you remember how the Bills handled Eric Wood when he first came in? They had Jeff Gardner, and they started Wood at guard. And I think, you save a little bit of money by cutting Morris this year, but you save a lot more cutting him next year. So I think you draft a guy like Creed Humphrey who can come in, play guard next to Morris for a year, and then he can become your center. And then you have a rookie, a guy in a rookie contract at center, and then you can restock up at that position. So I think there's a lot of ways that they can kind of save money with that, with also maintaining the quality of the team that they saw this year. So I don't think it's necessarily, if you cut a player, you're also losing. I think there's ways you can save money and also improve the team at the same time.
Well, I think you bring up a really interesting point there, and you had mentioned something just a moment ago. When you're sitting at 30, that what ends up happening in the NFL draft, and we've referenced this a bunch of times. I've heard Bill Polian say it 50 times, and if there's anybody that I believe talking about how front ends are run, it's Bill Polian, right? Whatever he says to me is gospel. I will believe everything he says because his track record says you should believe everything that I say. But he talks about most NFL teams only have between 15 and 18 actual first-round picks. So as the boards start to degrade, we see guys that are taken, the draft analyst goes, well, they're head scratchers. I don't know why you would take this guy here. Well, that might have been once you get into 15, 16, 17, 18, these teams' boards are starting to fall apart, right? Yeah. Well, once you get down to 25 through 32, that's the end of that fifth-year option, and teams might still have one or two first-round players still up on the board. Now, if you're Buffalo, you're not going to have 30 first-round players on the board. That's not how organizations work. And you said before that, that it's a different discussion about trading back. I think you have to have a real honest conversation with yourself as a Bills fan and say, what are our needs? We need help at the defensive end position. I personally think we need. I think we need help at the defensive end position. You're not getting that at 30. You're not getting that at 30. If you need help at the guard position, okay, you're going to get the third best guard, right? You need help at inside linebacker. Well, with the exception of last year, inside linebackers are normally 32 to 45, the first one off the board. And centers historically have been the same, right? Every once in a while, you'll see a center sneak up. But for the most part, you really have to ask yourself when you're sitting down that far, am I going to get my value for my pick here? Am I going to get the best player off the board at this position? And, if you're looking at your board and there's one guy left and you're sitting at 30 and you look at it and say, listen, it's not worth it, you have to make that trade and just accept it as an organization, accept it as a fan. I don't feel comfortable locking in that the Bills will keep the 30th pick because they're too active in the draft to turn down value. I really have a feeling like they're going to look at value and say the 30th pick isn't worth it to us. Because there's going to be another team that's going to want to jump up for that fifth-year option.
Yeah, especially when teams been so good at finding value there in second, third, fourth round. Like, Bean is, he's made it, you go back and you look at guys that he found outside of the first round, Deion Dawkins, Matt Milano, Teron Johnson. Like, I think in a year where salary cap is such a topic of conversation and it's so important that having more swings as opposed to a swing higher, I think is going to be more important. I think the more swings you take in those middle rounds, the more chances you're going to have to find. You're going to have to find another Matt Milano. More chances you'll have to sign starting quality players, another Teron Johnson, whoever it is. I think, it's, like you guys said, I think just getting as many swings and as much value is more important than that 30th, picking that 30.
Yeah, and to me, it just cracks me up because you talk about teams, you talk about trading up, you talk about usually teams will trade up aside from the first round. They'll trade up to try to get in front of other teams. Well, who's in the Super Bowl again?
Right.
Tampa.
Yeah.
What division are they in? Who are they?
And it's
They're
AFC South.
with Carolina. I think we know a few connections down there.
Oh, that's
Carolina
an
wanted to get back in the first
look
round.
at this guy.
Talk about
Yeah.
jumping in front of Tampa for a player. You know what I mean? So,
But that's reasonable.
Yeah.
Like that's a very reasonable
so
conversation.
the Bills could probably use those connections to maybe fleece Carolina, who wants to get a player before Tampa gets their hands on him.
Well, especially since Carolina doesn't have to jump very high. Yeah, Carolina won't have to jump very high. Like you're not asking to fall very far back into the second round.
No, that's the brilliance of the plan.
Yeah. Well, that's the other thing is I think if there's a player who if a team who's going to be picking at 40 again, you're only moving back, 10 positions, 10 positions to get probably the same player when you look at the Buffalo's needs. Like when you said, you look at defensive ends, you look at, whether it's offensive line, you look at a tight end, I don't think there's going to be that much of a drop off in pick value. And, I think that's huge. And, I think at the end of the day, the story of this draft, the story of this offseason is going to be where can they find value and how can they set themselves up for when this rookie window's over. Because Josh's rookie contract window is almost done. He's going, maybe they're able to do a Trey White, where they build it into that 5th year, or same thing that they're doing with Pat Mahomes, where you build that extension into the 5th year. But, they need to avoid, what the Eagles are doing with Carson Wentz. Granted, I don't think Josh is going to fall off that cliff, but it's all about not handcuffing yourself and keeping that window open as long as possible, because, eventually the window does close. Even if Josh keeps performing super well, it's how long can you keep that window open? And it's, smart drafting. And it's how the Patriots have done it all. How have the Patriots been so successful? They accumulate draft picks. They develop into the best versions of themselves, and then they leave. They get compensatory picks, and they do it all over again. And I think that's a really, whether the Bills can emulate that, I don't know, but I think that's definitely the road the Bills are heading down. And especially the one thing that I keep thinking about too, along with the draft, is all these veteran free agents, middle class of free agents that are going to be coming out, that are going to be cut, cap casualties, that are going to be looking for paydays in 2022 when the cap hopefully gets fixed. And I think Buffalo is going to be a really attractive spot for veterans who say, man, I need to go get, go somewhere where I can play well, and then, get one more big contract. And, you look at guys like who came here for a year, Jordan Phillips, EJ Gaines, who ended up going out, buying into the system and getting massive getting bigger contracts. And I think that's another place where I think the Bills can really find value this year, is that middle class of free agents that I think that are just going to be essentially ring chasing, 2022.
Well, and to that point, we'll kind of have to close on this, Ryan. I feel like this free agency is going to be something that a lot of us have never seen before, because there's going to be your big ticket free agents, right? And the value won't, the value for money, they're not going to see that big a pay difference, even though the cap's going down. Those top tier free agents are still going to get the contracts they would in any other scenario, but it's those middle ground free agents where guys are just going to hunt 1 and 2 year deals, because you just gotta hold your ground. You got to take what you can get, and you just got to pray for next year. And this is going to be a really aggressive free agency class, like really aggressive free agency class, because everybody's going to be making the same money. So I mean, that's the contract offers are going to be pretty similar, and everybody's going to be making the same money.
Yeah, and I think Buffalo, with their health facilities and, coming in, playing in the AFC Championship, I said it on Twitter last week, I think Buffalo's going to be a place where guys are going to want to come and ring chase for a year. And I think that's massive. And I'm fascinated to see what kind of, you know, veteran guys are going to be interested in coming here, because it's clearly a place that guys want to play. And I think one of the things that really stood out to me this postseason was players who, like Jordan Phillips and Shaq Lawson, who excelled under McDermott and went out and got paid elsewhere, were coming out on Twitter, you know, congratulating Buffalo. And I think it's amazing on the macro level the how the organization has had a facelift. You know, when you go back to what the team looked like at the end of that 2016 season to now. And, you know, I think Buffalo, with all the cap issues and the draft and everything, I think they're in a really good position to even, you know, improve their roster just because of, you know, their perception around the league.
Ryan, where can everybody find your stuff? Where can everybody find you, my friend?
You can find me on Twitter at SportsRock2. I'm over at Buffalo Fanatics. We'll be dropping me and Mitch will be recording a new podcast and dropping it next week. You can find it on their Buffalo Fanatics in wherever you get your podcast from. And Paul and Mario, thank you so much. You guys are one of the people that really makes Twitter fun, and being gracious with your time and your platform is super, super appreciated. You guys are killing it. You guys have a really unique platform doing this, you know, and I really appreciate it.
Hey, man, no, that's the honor is all ours. Trust us. We're just two idiots drinking Tim Hortons driving around. So that's, you know, the fact that anybody wants to talk to us is still shocking. All right, thanks again, Ryan.
Easy, Ryan.
All right, thank you,
All
guys.
right, later.
Have a good one.